So hi everyone. My name's Kim Smith and I'm really thrilled to have you all here. And thanks for joining in our first virtual symposium. We have hosted our GPSEN Sustainability Symposium several years and want to acknowledge Portland Community College's very generous support over the years for that. But here we are, all home and remote. So we're using Zoom. We're going to have a couple just quick little comments on that. We have everybody muted at this time and with cameras off. Yeah, everybody should be muted. So thanks for everyone. We have two folks doing tech help for us who are going to be unmuting folks when there are opportunities to have dialogue. And the other features, you'll see you can raise your hand. Anyway, I have a wonderful, our first speaker is a wonderful leader here in Portland. And so I'm going to hand the reins over to our board president, GPSEN board president, Serena Dressel.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all here today. I'll just work on getting my screen up with these slides. Great. Okay, thank you all for joining us again today with the Greater Portland Sustainability Education Network. I'll be giving a quick overview of what we'll be doing in our next 2.5 hours, as well as recognizing some of our Sustainability Award winners. So first, welcome. Our theme is a call for action, and this is in line with our motto of our organization, which is educate, empower, and engage. And GPSEN, or the Greater Portland Sustainability Education Network, has a mission to connect diverse organizations in a collaborative network that multiplies our collective capacity, to educate, empower, and engage each other to help create a healthy, just, and thriving region where education for sustainability is prioritized and integrated across sectors, and everyone has opportunities to shape a sustainable future. If you'd like to learn more about our organization, you can learn more at our website, GPSEN or GPSEN.org. And this is a quick overview of our program for this afternoon. First, I will be giving welcoming remarks and recognizing our award winners, followed by a call for action video and more of our call for action theme being discussed by Joe and Kim. We will next have a workshop, Food Forests and a Tool for Climate Stability and Community Resilience, followed by 3 presentations with the themes of Agro Biodiversity in Context of Food Security, Social Justice through Gardening, and Community and Solar Equity. And lastly, we will wrap up with a community discussion and interactive portion of our afternoon where you all will be able to contribute. And this will be a community dialogue for action and resilience led by our executive director. So thank you again for all joining us today, and we look forward to sharing this with you all. First and foremost, thank you to all of our sponsors who helped make our original event possible, as well as today. And we like to say we're all in this together. So thank you again to Portland Community College, KBOO Community Radio, Green Living, a practical journal for mindful living, the United Nations Association Portland Chapter, Seven Sails Vineyard, and Christopher Bridge. Thank you all. And next, we would like to take time to celebrate and honor our local sustainability advocates whose work helps to advance our mission. And beyond us recognizing them today, you can stay tuned for our podcasts and blog posts that will go into greater detail about all of the wonderful work that we are recognizing that they are being recognized for. So first and foremost, I would like to recognize Mac Poro-Tosano, who works at Portland Community College as the Multicultural Center Coordinator. And we're recognizing him for his work with the Pacific Climate Warriors and 350 Pacific. And we also wanted to give space for Mac to say hello. If you're here, Mac, now is a great time to shout out to everyone.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I just want to thank the folks who nominated me for this. Is totally unexpected, and because there's so much work, I'm not used to taking recognition for things we're still working on. So I hope this award opens up opportunities to meet new people and expand our climate justice work. But I'm really honored. Yeah, I'm just really shocked too at the same time. So I really appreciate it, and thank you all, and I look forward to our work ahead.
Thank you, Mac. Again, we recognize Mac for the Staff Sustainability Leadership Award with Portland Community College. And next, we will be recognizing our Student Sustainability Leadership Awards, and we're honoring 2 of our College Network members, Michelle Bates from Portland State University and Billy Fish from Reed College, for their campus divestment campaign work, which you'll be able to learn more about in our blogs and podcasts. Billy and Michelle, I think that you might be here as well if you'd like to say anything or say hello to the group.
Hello everybody, and thank you to everybody that's been working on this project, because it takes a coalition to do these projects to move forward in a better sustainable future.
Yeah, and I want to say pretty much the exact same thing. That the 2 people before me have said. I'm extremely honored to be awarded this, and also I know that it does take a coalition of a lot of people working together, and so thank you very much.
Thank you both. And if anyone wants to join our college network, we would love your support in furthering these campaigns. Thank you. Next, we'd like to recognize our Nonprofit Sustainability Leadership Award winner, Lara Andanaro, who is with the Sunrise Movement PDX, and we're recognizing them for all of their climate justice youth advocacy. And Lara was unable to make it today, but we want to recognize Sunrise Movement's ongoing impact on climate justice work in Portland. So thank you, Sunrise Movement, and it's a large movement, so maybe some other chapter members are here today, so thank you if you're listening. We would also like to recognize our Business Sustainability Leadership Award winner, Kaitlin Horsley, who is the Principal Sustainability and Decarbonization Strategy person at Portland General Electric. And one of the things that we would like to recognize Portland General Electric for is their work in highlighting the Portland Public Schools climate curriculum and financially supporting the development of that curriculum. And I believe that Kaitlin is here as well. If you'd like to say anything, Kaitlin, we invite you to.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Great. Thank you so much, Serena. This is Kaitlin Horsley. I'll keep it short, but we are really pleased. Thank you so much for this recognition. It's really a bright spot in some difficult times that we're all going through right now. So as Serena said, I'm working on a blog post with some additional information about the climate curriculum that we're really excited and working on with Portland Public Schools, as well as some of our other work that we're continuing even during this time. But other than that, we're really excited about this opportunity and looking forward to hearing the great sessions that you guys have planned for today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaitlin. Lastly, we'd like to recognize our Community Member Sustainability Leadership Award winner. Jose Michalascas is a climate justice organizer with Verde, and we're also recognizing his work for fairless transit and transit justice oriented work. Jose was unable to make it today, but we want to recognize his hard work and thank him for his work in Portland communities. So thank you, Jose. And next we'll transition to introduce Joe Cole Haines, who will be talking a little bit more about our theme, a call for action, and a fun video that we have to share related to that.
Well, hello everyone. This is pretty surreal. I just wanted to pause for a moment here and reflect on the fact that we're all globally in this pandemic and crisis alongside the environmental climate crisis. And the idea for the call to action, or call for action video, was kind of spurred by this thought that we're all alone and isolated, but we can show how we're still a part of the movement and what we're called to for action as we move forward. And through the process of making the video, which was really only over the last week and some change, you know, I realized that different people have different access to technology and privilege and support systems, so that not everybody can make a video. And it's just a really surreal time we're in right now. And one quick aside, I've spent the last 6 weeks without my 12-year-old daughter, and timing wise, she literally just arrived in our house minutes ago. So I can hear her playing with my son right now, and I'm like overwhelmed with emotions. And also I did want to also recognize that I do have a lot of incredible privilege, and I just really want to take stock of that and acknowledge also the indigenous lands that this is all being held on. You know, it's important to recall where we are, how we got here, and how we're going to move forward with this sustainability movement, but also our narratives and mythology and story. So this little video is my little contribution, and thank you to the people who sent videos over the past week. Ideally, moving forward, more people can contribute their videos and thoughts and create a broader and more diverse and richer story of how we're coping with, how we're dealing with our journey, you know, as we're in isolation, but we're all still together, you know. I don't know if Kim wanted to pop in, or if we just want to get right into the video here.
Yeah, I'll just share something just for a moment. Oh, Joe, we're really grateful that you're back in Portland again and doing serving on our outreach and communications team with GPSEN. You've done a lot for Portland Community College and our community, so this was a fun way to utilize your skills and have some voices. So I'm going to share the screen again, and I'm going to show the two videos. Okay, I'm going to do one that's the climate change. We have one on youth takes and insights from youth on climate change that was going to be one of our big topics during the big symposium. So let's do that, and then we'll play your video. Okay, so if you want to, you can turn off your screen and microphone there, and I'll just move us over here. Okay, so our first one, and hopefully this will behave itself and you'll be able to see it. Make it big.
Climate change is here. Necessity that the public be informed on it.
These news outlets aren't talking about climate change because they think it's a political issue, when in reality it's a scientific fact.
It is imperative that we have media that is factual and responsibly reporting on the impact of climate change. There are individuals that are actively funding media to create a false narrative on the state of our planet and how much time we actually have left.
When our media fails to cover or denies climate change, it hurts the communities most vulnerable to its impacts. The media talks about the climate crisis like it's a problem for the future, but it's already here. And if it continues to take a backseat to the public eye, the implications will become more and more severe.
Climate change is here, and it's happening, and And young people should be the voice of this movement because it's our futures that are at stake.
I would love to see more people of color, more indigenous people being invited to these really important conversations and decision-making processes.
Really involve the young people's perspective. Being on forms of media like Instagram and Snapchat, I've actually been overwhelmed by the amount of teenagers taking action. That's pointing out the fact that teenagers have a voice in this crisis. We are the ones that are going to inherit the climate crisis, and we are the ones that have to clean up the mess that has already been made. It is important that our voices are the ones that are being heard.
When we're given the opportunity to share our stories, I think it helps other people connect to the climate movement and see how climate change affects their lives as well, and hopefully it can inspire them to take more action.
So it is absolutely necessary that the media steps up its game and starts treating climate change like the climate crisis it is. The media needs to start actively covering this as a climate emergency.
Okay, so this is the video that we're so grateful that Joe was able to pull together with a variety of folks in our community. You might recognize some people, and you know, enjoy this call for action. Here we go. Here's a new video.
We want everyone watching this video to help us save almost extinct animals so they don't go extinct.
What's important to me is helping students and other folks understand how natural systems work, what's possible when it comes to taking care of them, and helping them develop resources for doing so.
In these troubled times, I think it's my responsibility to provide the support to our children so that they can face the future with a sense of hope.
I saw the flash in your eye just as you arrived. You're so damn mysterious and sly. Now, why am I not surprised? Well, if this is supposed to happen, I'll just let it happen to me. Walking on solid ground, I found the face of the moon. He was smiling down on us, singing his toothless tune. He says, my light illuminates one love. So sing me to sleep and let those stars have their way with me tonight.
There are so many ways to make a difference. One way, help our pollinators build more mason bee houses.
I'm called to action right now by continuing to do the divestment work at Reed College, by doing work related to student body government at Reed, and other sustainability efforts on campus. I'm also called to action simply by, reading things that I haven't had the chance to. And lastly, by taking care of myself and taking care of my family.
Strong girl, a woman with curls. He found me singing about my love for this world, making big time stars redemption. I'm medicine wheel and a gateway into the ocean. Moving and shaking about, gotta clear my headlight. What are my intentions here? And are you ready for a fight?
so fun, Joe. Thank you very much. Do you have a word or two you want to share just to finalize that?
Sure. And thank you. It was fun to make, and you know, it's neat to see what people come up with when you just throw out a kind of, you know, what is it you're up to, and it was neat to see what people came up with, and it would really be great to see more of people's stories and personal contributions at this time. And I just wanted to, I guess, elaborate on that and connect it to the Mac. Mac and I had a great conversation yesterday, which I'm excited to announce. We, you know, have this new podcast that we're gonna launch here called ESD Sustain Me, and Education for Sustainable Development for 2030. Really exciting. And Kim, you're gonna get into all that later. But as a podcast, Mac and I really had a great conversation, and I'll be publishing that podcast later today, so be on the lookout for it. But yeah, it was neat to have everybody or some people contribute some videos and put together a little something sweet, and that there was some youth, some elders, you know, diverse people coming forth and sharing some stories is neat. And I'm just honored to, you know, be participating with everybody at this time. And it's just so crucial we change our story. And that first video you shared is real, and the fear and the intensity of what we're facing is scary sometimes, and even incapacitating. And I guess the attempt with that video was to try and have something a bit more uplifting and encouraging, which, you know, is another call to action, is for us to provide what Billy said at the end of that video too, that self-care while we care for each other as well, which I thought was really a sweet way to end that video. So yeah, I'm just happy to be a part of this movement with y'all. So thank you for being, you know, on this online virtual symposium while we're in a pandemic globally. I mean, we're just in unprecedented times in so many ways. So I'm just honored to be a part of it.
Well, we look forward to seeing more of your creations, Joe, and having our award winners will each be interviewed, so you get to learn more about their work with Joe's podcasts. So yeah, ESD Sustain Me, great new opportunity to have our voices heard. Okay, so we're gonna go now. I've got a couple slides to share, and then we're going to move into our speakers. So enjoy, you know, we'll have those videos, those links available. We also will have this whole presentation recorded. So if there are things that you're interested or want to see again, we'll get that out to you after the show. So, all right, a couple things. I'm just giving some framework. So I'm a sociology professor at Portland Community College. I specialize in environmental sociology, and I have such hope around the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030. And so just to get a sense of how GPSEN is framing our symposium and a lot of our programming, we choose different SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, to focus on and drill down to and think about what are we doing in our own Portland region to address these different issues. They are global goals, they're aspirational, but we're doing the work locally, right? You can look at these and see which ones you're involved with, right? Where do you volunteer? Where do you work? So today we're really going to be focusing on number 1, issues around poverty, 2, around hunger and food security. We'll be talking about health as well. And of course, we're all wishing each other good health. And then 4, education. So GPSEN itself, the Greater Portland Sustainability Education Network, is really trying to expand that definition of education to not just be formal ed, so of course schools and higher ed, but we're also talking about public awareness campaigns and workforce training and the things, you know, workshops that our nonprofits and governments do. So let's really celebrate how much good work is happening locally. The other thing that to keep an eye on is a new decade. I am so excited that UNESCO has launched a new decade this year called ESD for 2030. So again, Education for Sustainable Development is the international term. We usually say sustainability education in the United States, but just know when you see ESD, we're talking about the same thing. So we're just an invitation, you know, this is the whole idea now, is saying that we can't achieve any of the Sustainable Development Goals without ESD. So for all of us, you know, let's identify how we're teachers, how we're learners, and what we can do locally and broader than even our own towns to really make a difference. So again, the theme for this conference symposium was a call for action. This is a call for action, and we've got a decade to try to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and let's have education be the engine for that change. And last piece here, how do we do it? What are some skill sets that we need? And so some of the presentations I want you to think about, and if you notice these types of elements coming in to their talks, you know, when do you see systems thinking? What does it mean for us to be able to see the dots and recognize the complexities of the world around us? How do we acknowledge and prepare for risks? A very important issue for all of us now. How do we anticipate this new normal? Normative competency, how are we going to learn new values and norms so we don't fight with each other? How can we live in a world where we actually can get along again? All of this is an invitation, you know, be innovative. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to try, right? Don't be alone. Collaborate when you can. Question the system. Critical thinking skills, really key. And also, you know, as Billy said to you, self-awareness. Be aware of who we are, how we can contribute. We're going to keep saying we're all in this together. So, you know, let's be problem solvers. We're being called for action, you know, essential time in history for us to have integrated collaborative efforts together. So goal for education, let's do ESD for 2030, and hopefully these presentations will give you some new skill sets. So we're going to shift gears now, and we have your first presenter. We're going to have a workshop guided by Marisha Auerbach, a wonderful permaculture designer and teacher at Oregon State and Portland Community College. Looking forward to hearing more about Permaculture Rising as well. So Marisha, if you would like to share your screen, we'll go to you. Your screen, microphone, and video.
All right, are we on? I can only see you, Kim. Okay, great. Well, thank you for organizing this, Kim, and your team. It's challenging to be able to transfer an in-person workshop to being one online, and I'm really glad that everyone could join us. I'm pleased to be able to share about permaculture and food forests, as I think that both of these, but permaculture and food forests, offer delightful ways that we can respond to the current challenges with positive responses that enrich many of the current ecological, political, social, and economic challenges, while also building community and strengthening our resiliency locally. I'm having difficulty advancing my slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, so first, I want to go over what is permaculture. I know there might be some people joining us that might not be familiar with this term. I think of permaculture as a combination of the words permanent and culture. There's many different ways to define it, and so I have 4 sentences to help us understand what permaculture is. First, it is a design science. So permaculture is based in observation, and we look at the context of a place to consider how we can meet the needs for the client while also restoring ecological function. Permaculture design is guided by the native ecology. So we design our built environments for stewardship of our resources and the habitat for other beings. Permaculture begins with a thoughtful site analysis. So as permaculture designers, we look to determine the unique climatic considerations, the resources, the limiting factors, and other potential characteristics to guide meeting the needs of inhabitants on site. Permaculture design strives to reduce our ecological footprint while meeting human needs locally, using local resources while caring for other species, neighboring communities, and the global community. So we know that resilience is recognizing our interconnection, both with all the other humans in our community, the global community, and other species on this planet. And this picture here is Bill Mollison, who is the man that's accredited with founding the term permaculture, although he's not the first person to do permaculture. Permaculture has been practiced since the beginning of time by cultures that are rooted in their place. But often permaculture is seen as just a gardening system. And so I wanted to just assert that permaculture is so much more than just a gardening system. It's looking at our entire culture on how we design our lives on this planet. So I'm mostly going to be talking about food forests. And so here's some sentences to help you understand what I mean by a food forest. A food forest is an intentional forest. It's designed based on the observation of ecology in the native forest. This picture in the center shows the different layers of a forest garden. And as you look at those, the example here is using fruit and nut trees and useful plants, but you could also think about the different layers of the forest out there in our woods, where we'd have, for that tall layer, the canopy layer, we might have the big leaf maple or the western red cedar, going down to the vine maple or the hazelnut, and then our shrub layers of the red flowering currant, ocean spray, and down into more herbaceous plants, stinging nettles, and some of the sweet wildflowers as examples. So in a food forest, native plants may be substituted for cultivated plants to meet local needs. Plant guilds are developed to enhance relationships. So we're trying to mirror what we see in the native forest in our cultivated environments. And I'm not talking about going out into an already existing forest to replace native plants with cultivated plants. A food forest is a strategy for planting more trees and vegetation to enhance ecosystem functions and yield. And if anyone's been following some of the articles about how COVID is related to zoonotic diseases, one of the things that we're losing with this loss of biodiversity is we're losing ecological functions in our environments, which is causing this loss of biological buffers, is enhancing our potential for pandemics. So here's a picture of my backyard, and I look at this picture thinking about, how do we design to meet our needs so that we don't deplete our resource base? How do we design for true sustainability? And here's some functions of healthy ecosystems. And this is what I think we should all strive for where we live, at our home habitats, in our greater community, is how are we existing in this framework in a way that creates and supports life of other species, and also how do we live our lives so that we're ensuring that there's clean air, clean water, and toxins through various filters. This is how healthy ecosystems work. Healthy ecosystems help to regulate the atmosphere by recycling carbon and nitrogen. And you can see in this picture on the right, that purple flower is a lupin, which is a nitrogen fixing species. Healthy ecosystems help build soil and soil microorganisms. So using mulch and having food chains intact helps to do that. Healthy ecosystems support healthy life by having relationships between different species. It helps to regulate pests and diseases. Healthy ecosystems help perpetuate themselves by the reproductive functions of each of the species. And healthy ecosystems are integrated closed loop systems. So if I was doing this presentation in person, I'd ask you all if you know who this woman is. This is Wangari Maathai. She's the founder of the Green Belt movement, and she's from Kenya. She's one of my heroes, and she got the Nobel Peace Prize. So she's here to remind us that it's time for an ecological imperative. We need to design to enhance ecology in our environments. So Wangari would say, we have a responsibility to protect the rights of generations of all species that cannot speak for themselves today. The global challenge of climate change requests that we ask no less of our leaders or of ourselves. So I'll ground out this presentation with these ethics on natural systems. I think this is something to reflect on how we steward our environment. So it's important that we identify and we protect any remaining forests. We need to practice vigorous rehabilitation of degraded and damaged ecosystems to a stable state. It's up to us to work on restoring the land. The third one says that that we should establish plant systems for our own use on the least amount of land that we need for our own existence. So we need to reflect on, what are we consuming and what is that impact both in our community and in the global community, as well as recognizing that there are threatened plant and animal species. And so we need to create refuges for them to have homes as well. So like Wangari Maathai, many other climate experts are saying that if we design for perennial agriculture or allow farmland to revert to grassy or wooded states, that's the easiest and the most direct way to slow climate change. So agriculture can be in a perennial way where we don't have to practice tilling as often to be able to disturb the soil layers, and instead we can create an environment where the soil layers are not inverted. And by having perennial plants on the landscape, we're able to sink more carbon in the soil. So this is how that works, where plants are able to capture sunlight and then they convert that sunlight into, through photosynthesis, they grow carbon from their roots. And then that carbon in the soil that's grown through the actions of photosynthesis and the capturing of the sun is then food for soil microbes. And over time, the soil food web becomes more healthy. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well. So right now we're also at a point where we're experiencing loss of biodiversity. I think I've heard that 40 to 70% of insect species are in decline. And when we think about that, you can consider the loss of biomass as those insects complete their life cycle and fall to the ground in a closed loop system to be able to help fertilize. There's also, there's been a great awareness of bees and the threats to the honeybee population, the European honeybee, but there's so many different insect populations that are affected by all of these chemicals in our environment and the way that things have been manipulated. So we also see increase in flooding and potential disasters, landslides. And so the more biodiversity that we have, the more that we have perennial tree-based ecosystems, then the trees help hold water in place. They increase water infiltration so that we can store more water in our soil through this biological interaction. And by storing more water in our soil, then we're able to weather drought better in our soils. So I know I've seen some articles recently about how the Western states right now are in an unprecedented drought. I mean, having wildfires right now up in Whatcom County in Washington is shocking for April. And by having a perennial tree cover, we can help hold more water in the soil to avoid these sorts of catastrophes. So here's my statistic. It said that soil that has 2% living organic matter in the top foot can reduce the rainfall or irrigation needed by poor soils by as much as 75%. So that's like if you're a gardener and you're out there watering your garden every day, if you get up to 2% living organic matter in the form of compost or mulch in your soil, then you're watering every 3 days rather than every day. And not only that, but that organic matter and compost in your soil is helping to provide habitat for the soil microbes to keep this cycle going. This is a picture from the Permaculture Designer's Manual showing a tree as an integrated participant with other plants and providing lots of different ecological functions and yields for the environment. So design your landscape to mimic nature. This picture shows a linear progression of succession. And when you're thinking about your annual vegetable garden, you're on the earlier part of succession where you're constantly needing to enhance your soil, build more soil. But as we get into shrubs and softwood trees, we're creating more habitat for wildlife. And the wildlife is helping to enhance the soil and to enhance our yields. So when I think about a slide like this, I consider where I'm at and how I'm managing my landscape, and how I can manage the landscape to provide for my needs as well as enhance ecological functions, and how I can work with the unique characteristics that are inherent in nature to be able to do that, to both enhance ecological functions on my site as well as provide for my own yields. So if we look at indigenous cultures all over the world, they express their sense of place through intimate bioregional design strategies. This means that the way that they design for their lifestyle, for their homes, for their food systems, for the way they make money is integrated in the context of the place where they live. So permaculture design is just a modern term that asks us to come home, to inhabit our place, and to design our lives based in the context of our place. So this is my front yard. This was a lawn just about 4 years before this picture was taken. And what you can see in this picture is that I've got a layered polyculture that's filled with fruit trees and berry bushes and medicinal herbs and plants for pollinators and plants for mulch. And there's all these different layers of the forest that are contained within the aesthetic of my front yard. And it's quite different from most other yards that I see in my neighborhood. So here's how it's expressing the 7 layers of the forest garden. So my tall tree is that sweet gum tree that's in the center, and it helps to provide shade both for my chickens in the summer when they move into the front yard, and also to block the western sun from heating my house in the summer. And the low tree layer in this picture, I've got pawpaw, I've got plum, I've got cherry, I've got persimmon. And then going down into the shrub layer, I've got elderberries and currants and blueberries and gooseberries. And the herbaceous layer has angelica, and we've got muskmallow, and there's irises, and there's comfrey. And then down into the soil surface, the ground cover crops, I've got lots of different bulbs. I've got strawberries to cover the ground. Bulbs actually go into the root crops, the Rhizosphere. Right now there's a diversity of tulips in bloom. And then for the vertical layers, there's that trellis in front of my house that has a kiwi vine growing up it. And I also have evergreen clematis there. So this slide just shows the diversity of ecological services to help you get a sense of like how many different amazing things plants provide and wild animals provide that keeps our system moving. And so when we think about the Gaia Hypothesis by James Lovelock, it's all about the interconnectedness of all these species that helps keep the biosphere healthy and intact. So whether you're making soil more receptive by having deep tap-rooted plants in your system, or attracting birds to help disperse seed, or creating shelter for birds and other wildlife, there's all these different things that our landscapes can provide. So I want to give you a bit of an overview of the different layers in the forest garden and how they impact a design for your yard or for our landscape. So a tree is generally something that's greater than 40 feet tall. An understory tree is considered 12 feet to 40 feet tall, and that's usually with a single trunk is what a tree is. A shrub has multiple trunks. Trees, by being the largest species in the area, is what dominates photosynthesis, as the leaves are what catches the most amount of sunlight, and these large species use the most amount of nutrients and water. Trees determine how the rain falls on the landscape. Trees help to regulate the biomass accumulation. So they impact, what the pH quality is of our soil, or how nutrients are taken up and shared. And trees also provide habitat. And when we're thinking about food forests, here's a list of all the different fruit trees that we could have in our system in our climate, in the temperate climate here in the maritime Northwest, where our earliest fruit trees to produce begin with the mulberries, and then the latest fruit trees that produce end with the medlars, which are produced in November. And if you've never eaten a medlar before, there's a beautiful medlar tree in the center of Rock Creek campus, Portland Community College. And that's the picture on the bottom right, is the medlar. Shrubs tend to be 6 foot to 12 feet tall. They have many stems and they're woody. This picture is showing a pink champagne currant, which is my favorite variety of currant. Shrubs can grow in the full sun or in the part shade, but they provide more fruit if they grow in the full sun. They provide habitat and food for wildlife as well as shelter. They offer shelter for ground-dwelling animals. Many shrubs have evolved in a forest edge situation, and that's why they can grow in part shade or full sun. And if you're looking to propagate a shrub, it's often by suckers or by underground runners. I think about a bird or some sort of animal going through the forest and stepping on a branch, and then that branch causes contact with the branch in the soil, which then causes the shrub to root. So that's often how we see these plants propagated. And here's our line of berries of what we can grow from, starting with the earliest berries, which are strawberries in our climate, and then our latest berries are the Aronia berry. The Aronia berry is the one pictured in the middle picture on the right side of the screen. It's really high in vitamin C. It's the highest vitamin C berry in the world. And the picture on the top left shows a gummy berry, which is a not very well-known berry that also fixes nitrogen and will produce in the shade. We also have a honeyberry on the bottom left, then of course the hood strawberry, gooseberry on the top right, and then the picture on the bottom right is a white currant. Herbaceous plants tend to be the most abundant layer in the food forest. They tend to be about 1/2 foot to 6 feet tall, and many of them go dormant in the winter. This picture is showing herbaceous plants in a plant guild, which is a community of plants that's growing underneath an apple tree in a friend's yard in Olympia. And these plants that are shown in the herbaceous layer are actually they have a function where they're preventing grass from spreading towards the tree so that they're maintaining the edge of that garden bed. Herbaceous plants are great for conserving and cycling nutrients. Many of these plants are mulch plants. Many of them have deep tap roots where the root exudates help open up the soil and help cycle nutrients. Herbaceous plants tend to be plants that support insect diversity, and there are also many plants that attract beneficial insects. They have a high productivity due to the large amounts of carbon dioxide near the surface of the soil. There are some herbaceous plants that enhance the receptivity of the soil. Some herbaceous plants attract beneficial insects and pollinators, and like I said, this is the most diverse layer in the forest garden. So here's some of my favorite herbaceous plants that I grow in my landscape. So borage is a wonderful plant for attracting bees and other beneficial insects, but you can tell if you've ever grown borage that it has these large leaves, these fleshy stalks, and that's what's characteristic of a plant that could be known as a dynamic accumulator, or a plant that helps create mulch and cycle nutrients in a forest garden. Muskmallow on the bottom left, is also a dynamic accumulator herb. This one also has a flower that attracts beneficial insects and the swallowtail butterfly, but it creates a lot of biomass that's great for mulch, and it has that dense, deep root system, which helps open up the soil. On the right, we have some examples of nitrogen fixers. There's a lupin shown actually with borage and muskmallow in a guild with an Asian pear tree. And then the picture on the bottom right is the gumi again. So here's an example of plants for attracting beneficial insects. We've got cilantro, which is showing the flower formation of the Umbelliferae family of plants that has flowers like landing pads for insects. The flowers bloom over a short period of time, but collectively they bloom over a long period of time. Zinnia, which is the other flower shown in this picture, is in the Compositae family. And the Compositae family of plants is known for having blooms that last for a really long period of time. And that's why many of these plants are our favorite cut flowers. Now, these two plant families are some of the most common plant families for attracting beneficial insects in our garden. The vine layer, vines tend to grow along the ground unless we provide support. And the picture in the background is mashua, which is a perennial nasturtium from the Andes. You can eat the tuber. And the picture was taken in October, where the gorgeous orange blooms look so bright against that dull sky that we have when it's really rainy in October. Vines are opportunistic as they crawl along the ground, and they try to find ways to climb up to be able to gather more sunlight. So sometimes they're parasitic. They can provide habitat for wildlife, and they help maximize the use of sunlight. I like to think of true sustainability is if all energy comes from the sun, right? Like wind energy comes from the sun, that's the sun heating the land. We've got solar energy, fossil fuels are stored sunshine. Then the only way to truly be sustainable is to catch the sun on those little solar panels that we call leaves, to be able to generate yields for ourselves and for our community. So vines really help by increasing the amount of leaf space that we can have in our environment so that we can capture more solar energy for yield. The last two layers we have are the Rhizosphere layer, the ground cover, which covers the soil surface, and that's a strawberry plant in the background, which is my favorite ground cover in the food forest. This layer prevents erosion. It helps enhance water absorption in the soil. It prevents evaporation by cooling the ground and shading the ground. It cools the soil temperature, and it provides shade for the soil microorganisms. Fungal relationships are also another layer in the food forest, and fungi help enhance the soil structure. They convert nutrients into an available form for plants. Fungi aid in water retention. If you think of the mycelium, that like white root-like hairs that you see under the soil where mushrooms are growing, it's like a sponge where it helps distribute the water and holds water in the soil. It also repels saline water. Mushrooms exhale carbon dioxide. They can help counteract disease rot fungi, and mushrooms can also prevent frost damage on roots. So that's really helpful in our winter months. And that picture on the left is a King Stropharia mushroom, which is a wonderful edible purple mushroom that I grow in my landscape. So when I'm designing my food forest, I like to think about local food webs. I think about how can I create more homes for all the different species that might be able to live in this environment, and how can I consider their needs and their ecological functions as a part of the system that I'm designing. So here on the bottom right, we've got a picture of the red-bellied newt, which is known for eating insects, and I'm always delighted when I see those in gardens that I've designed. So we've got these shocking statistics that we've been seeing on billboards for, over 10 years at least. I think it might have been 10 years since I've taken this picture, and I still see billboards like this up around the United States, that 1 in 6 Americans is struggling with hunger. We've got 1 in 4 children don't have enough to eat. And when I look at our land use patterns and how many lawns we have around the country, it just seems like it's a problem of managing resources rather than not being able to actually have enough food. So local production leads to resilient communities. And we're really seeing that right now as our farmers markets stay open and people are relying more on the safety that we get from being able to buy from local farms. This chart here is showing that eggs, fruits, and vegetables have the most volatile prices. And these are the things that we can produce most easily at home in our yard. I'm really glad every morning when I get a couple eggs from my chickens, and I haven't gone to the store in a number of weeks because it's all coming right here from my yard, which is only 6,600 square feet. So this is reflecting on a permaculture principle, which is designed from patterns to details. So now I'm going to show you just a few different kinds of food forests. I just made a new online course for Oregon State University, which is all about permaculture food forests, and we went around the Pacific Northwest and beyond looking at different types so that you can get an idea of how you might be able to get involved with this. This is a drone shot of my house. So this is showing the example of a home scale food forest. A home scale food forest is where you have the food forest in your backyard or in your front yard for that matter. Here's a picture of a map of my backyard. Home scale food forests can be as diverse as you can manage since it's all about growing your own landscape in your own backyard. So here's a chart showing fruit throughout the year. And so in my yard, I start with those strawberries and honeyberries, and they're coming up next month. And I end with apples, pears, quince, and persimmon. So I've selected varieties in my yard so that I always have fresh fruit to eat. And that Hudson's Golden Gem apple is a winter keeper. The Sai pear is a pear that you harvest in November, and then it's ripe in March. So I've designed so I don't need pears from Argentina. I can be getting fresh fruit from my yard for most of the year. A production food forest is where you're growing fruit for market. So production food forests need to be designed for efficiency. It's important to have ease of management because you might have various people that are working in this food forest and you might have turnover with your employees. Here's a picture of an urban food forest at an office. This food forest is on the corner of 12th and Market, and it's got the plaque that's shown on the bottom right. I think when you're in a public space, it's important to have signage so people know what's going on, so they can see that you can be growing food on parking strips that are only 3 foot 6 inches wide, like in this example. This corner space on 12th and Market in Southeast Portland has over 80 different useful species growing in very narrow strips of soil. Here's some pictures of a food forest in a school. We visited Manzo Elementary School in Tucson, Arizona, where many of the students that go to this school come from households that experience some level of food insecurity. So in this school, they have a food forest and they have educational programming for the students at all grades, and the students are learning how to build soil by managing the compost for the school. They're also learning they're learning about heirloom crops from that area, heirloom plants that grow and are adapted to the 6 inches of rainfall they get per year in Tucson, Arizona. And these elementary school students are learning how to propagate those plants, and then they bring them home so that they can have more food security in their home environments by sharing them with their parents. And this is one of my favorite food forests. This is the Beacon Hill Food Forest, which the Beacon Hill Food Forest got known internationally when it was created in Seattle, sponsored by the city of Seattle on public land. Community food forests offer opportunities for learning new skills and working with diverse groups. This is one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the city of Seattle, and there's lots of different people that come together to share this space and to grow food together. So this type of food forest is often reliant on fundraisers and donations. It's also very important to have signage to clarify the tasks and how people can participate, recognizing that some people are extroverted and have no problem interacting with people that they don't know, and other people might need a sign to be able to be guided on how they can be involved. It's important to have wide paths and adequate trellising to provide to make the space accessible for all people. And it's wonderful that Beacon Hill Food Forest is accessible for people in wheelchairs. In Beacon Hill Food Forest, they've looked at the scale of gathering spaces so that they can promote interaction between community members. So you can be in a small group or you can be in a larger group, and this was designed into their food forest. After every work party, they have a shared meal, and that's to help build community connection and to provide opportunities where they can enhance trust between community members. This is the last food forest I'm going to show you, and this is a venue food forest. This is in Olympia, Washington, and this is a food forest on the corner of Harrison and Division that hosts events and music. So it's a place where people can come for a picnic, where people might stumble upon the place when they want to see a live show, and yet they're surrounded by a resilient food system. So I hope that this gave you some ideas of what food forests are, how we can start seeing them in our urban fabric. And I feel like we're at this interesting period of time where, while we're all at home, we can revision what we want to see for the future. And I know that I want to see a future where we're helping to enhance ecological function, where the air continues to be cleaner, where people have access to clean water and fresh food, and that we're able to join in community and celebration. So that's my last slide there, my home habitat. And I think that I can open it up to questions. I'll stop my share.
That was absolutely beautiful, Marisha. Thank you so much. And if you want to turn on your video, then folks can see you and they can respond directly to you. I'm going to turn to Serena and Lyndall. If you guys can notice if people are raising their hand. There, I can see you there. And then if you can raise your hand, if you have a question or a comment for Marisha, then they'll unmute you and you guys can have a dialogue. And we have, about 10 minutes for this. Okay, so Amy Dvorak.
Hi, this was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, and perfect timing, especially with the weather and everything that's going on, good and bad. I am looking at this and thinking it's wonderful, but wondering how I can afford it, and if you have any suggestions on where we can get some of these plants at a decent price.
Yeah, a decent price, that is always selective. What that means for all of us might be different. So I will start with the cheapest way to get plants, and that would be maybe posting on Nextdoor or in some other neighborhood groups to see if anyone in your neighborhood is dividing their plants. I have practiced learning propagation, which has allowed me to get most of my plants for free or inexpensively using my skills. I also have a small plant nursery that's based off my 6,600 square foot yard. I see that Stephanie asked that question, what's the size of the yard? And my full property is 6,600 square feet. So I divide my plants and I pot them up, and then I provide them in my plant nursery. So that's posted online at permaculturerising.com is my nursery list. But I think that it's a great way to get to know people in your neighborhood by admiring their plants and asking if they'll share them with you for free. And as you build your own plants, then you'll be able to exchange with them too. Also, learning how to save seeds is a really great way to start this summer. I started saving seeds by just walking through my neighborhood and looking at seeds that were dry on a plant, popping them open, trying to just get to know what the expression of various plants are as seeds. And so that's something that we can look forward to later in the summer. I will be offering a workshop on seed saving in August. So hopefully that gave you a bit of an idea of going from getting plants for free or for trade to being able to support a nursery. Other nurseries that are open right now, I know that Portland Nursery is open. Naomi's Farm Supply is my favorite nursery in town. They're doing orders by email. And Birds and Bees Nursery is doing delivery for people who want to order from them. And I think all of those places have plants at a reasonable price. And my favorite fruit tree nursery, if you're looking for mail order fruit trees or berry bushes, is Rain Tree Nursery. We also have One Green World in Southeast Portland, and Burnt Ridge Nursery is another great nursery in Washington.
That's awesome. You know, one of the things, this is Kim, one of the things that I was thinking about while you were speaking is just how many people are feeling called to do victory gardens, right? Like there's this need for action. And of course, it is a privilege to even have any land at all. So, you know, what does it mean? And you have brought up some of the public spaces. How can folks who are in apartments or smaller spaces do some of this work?
Yeah, we can grow things in containers. So if you have access to sunlight, that's one way that you can have some soil if you're in an apartment. The community gardens are also great places to have access to land. There's community orchards as well in many neighborhoods in Portland where you can have access in exchange for being able to collaborate with people on stewarding the area. I know that Portland Community College also has the Learning Garden. So I don't know how many of these places are open and at what scale. I do know that some people are able to go to their community garden. I want to give a shout out to Albert Kaufman, who's on this call. He's got a website or a Facebook page for an organization called Farm My Yard. And so he's connecting people with people who need land with people who have land available. And there's many people who might have access to a yard and might not be able to get out and garden, or might not be physically able to do that, that might want to share with someone who could take care of their yard and grow some food in exchange for being able to share in the surplus.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Marisha, there are two questions on the chat page that I just want to bring up. One person asked, can you please share your favorite permaculture book for the home gardener?
Yeah, my favorite permaculture book is Practical Permaculture Solutions by Jesse Bloom and Dave Bainline.
Okay, fabulous. And Scott McLean asked, he said he didn't hear the best, you mentioned something about the best fruit tree place. And I guess the audio went out a little bit. Was it a mail order? What were you referencing?
Yeah, I see that from Stefania as well. So I actually mentioned three. I mentioned Rain Tree Nursery, which is in Southwest Washington, Burnt Ridge Nursery in Southwest Washington, and One Green World in Southeast Portland.
Okay. Okay, so you are able to see the chat page. That's good.
Yeah.
Because you can see there's one that Nirja has a question for you, and Nikki does as well. Okay, so while she's typing, let's go with one of the questions that Nikki asks. How do you make homes for beneficial but frequently misunderstood creatures?
There are so many different beneficial insects. It's hard to really consider. I don't tend to consider many of them individually because there's so many. You know, I think of the ones that I am familiar with, and then I know that there's so many more that I might not be familiar with. And for many insects, one of the ways to consider them for habitat is to not make your garden too tidy, to make sure that you have piles of leaves and branches and all sorts of different mulch materials and different textures, as well as some areas of clay that are exposed so that these different insects can find their homes. Okay, I'm going to go to the biggest challenge to adopt permaculture versus conventional gardening. I think the biggest challenge is to be able to learn to think holistically. For me, I didn't grow up in a household that had a garden, and I grew up being just enamored with the local ecology. So I think of gardening like an ecological system rather than planting things in rows. I mean, if you can see my background behind me, it's just hard to distinguish what plants are growing where because I grow more in a perennial sort of polyculture. And not all permaculture gardens need to be a polyculture, but through learning about ecology and using that as a foundation, then it's easier to wrap your head around the differences between conventional gardening as well and permaculture. I'm going to give a little plug here, and that's that I offer a once-a-month workshop on what to do now in the garden through People's Food Co-op. It's offered February through November, and it's been so popular this year that we're actually offering it twice per month. So if you want to just sink into learning more about permaculture gardening versus conventional gardening and increase your food production goals for this year, the next class is on May 6th.
That's awesome. Hey, so we have 2 more minutes for questions. We have 2 questions that just came in. If you can do a quick summary. Let's see, we have, how long does it normally take to get a fully flourishing food forest up and running? And this person, Lydia's wanted to start one for a while and doesn't know how much initial work it takes to get it going.
Yeah, I think that it's valuable to be strategic and to start small. I think that you can be more, you can rejoice in your successes easier if you don't use too much land to be able to begin with. And so that could just be one fruit tree with a small guild around it. As far as how long does it take to get a yield from the first fruit tree, that can be 5 to 6 years. In the first 5 to 6 years of my landscape, I supplemented by doing a lot of gleaning in my neighborhood. My partner and I run the Woodstock Portland Fruit Tree Project gleaning team, and we do our gleaning by bike. So that helps supplement. But we were eating out of our yard at the end of the first summer. And the way that we did that so quickly was by being strategic about how we were getting rid of the grass and succeeding out the grass by enhancing good materials for soil fertility. We brought in a bunch of manure and some straw bales. And so the first step in creating a good food forest would be to make sure that you're composting so that you can turn all your food scraps and organic materials into black gold.
That is great news. And so Holly did send you her question directly to you. So let's make sure to respond to hers. In addition, you've given us lots and lots of tools. So hopefully we can have a resource list. And there was a question about, you know, is there a place to find plans, simple plans that we can to design gardens? So maybe we could just share a resource list with all the attendees after when we do a follow-up after the symposium. Okay. Anyway, if you could respond to Holly's question, then we'll wrap it up and move on to our next speaker.
Okay. So Holly says, I see it came through privately, so I'm just going to read it. Curious what stands in the way of more food forests happening, or what could be done to help make it happen at a broader scale? Any policies that need to shift, or just education? I think that it's a mental shift. It's looking at like how we own land, whether we truly do have ownership over land, and shifting that to being able to work collaboratively to be able to care for our community. I mean, the city of Seattle gave up land for the Beacon Hill Food Forest to start. There was a lot of trust involved that this, you know, group of neighbors that came together were going to be able to be successful. And that kind of works in with Rashid's question that also came to me privately on how do you deal with the invasive weeds? You know, you need to, if you're going to be doing a community food forest on a municipal scale in public space, then it's important to be accountable for how it's being stewarded and to take care of preventing the spread of invasive weeds. There's a book that came out, and I'll put that on that resource list, on community food forests, and they are growing every year. There's more and more community food forests popping up all over the world, and that's really inspiring.
Wonderful. This is Oh my God, I can't believe how much I've learned. My uncle's a permaculturalist, and you took us to a whole new level, Marisha. So thank you for your contributions. And of course, you're an amazing teacher too. So hopefully folks can take some of your classes at some time. So be sure to share your resources, but also some opportunities that people might have to get to know you better.
Yeah, and if people want to learn more about food forests, we have a new self-paced course through Oregon State University. People can sign up at any time. And then the first section is self-paced, and there's no assignments that need to be turned in. But then in the fall, we're going to be having an instructor-led practicum. So I'll be working with students to get them through the design of a food forest on a site of their choosing.
Okay, maybe you can put a link or two also in the chat page so people can grab those. Okay, so we are going to move now to, I'm going to go back over here to sharing my screen. We're going to go now into shorter speakers. We've had a set of that was a larger workshop because she really wanted Marisha to really have that time to frame this up. And we do have a focus on food and diversity. And for us, this, how do we meet our basic needs right now? And so I'm going to introduce Nikki Youngsma, who's writer, artist, and editor with the Home Orchard Society. And so you get to now, you'll be able to share your screen, the Agro Biodiversity in context of food security. Yes, please teach us about food security.
Thank you for that introduction. My name is Nikki Youngsma, and I'm happy to be here, and thank you all for being here too. I'll be moving through my presentation quickly, just as a heads up. So I'm going to be talking today about agrobiodiversity in the context of food security. And first of all, I'm going to talk about what agrobiodiversity is and how to think of it in a modern context. I'm also going to lay out 4 cases and a case study in support of agrobiodiversity. Then I'll identify current threats to conservation efforts. And lastly, I'll leave you with actions that people can take to get involved in this work. So to start off, most people, here I'm just waiting for my screen to, there's a delay in getting it to go through the slides. So to start off, a lot of people go to the grocery store to get food. A lot of grocery stores have setups that are similar to this. They're very large buildings. They have aisles full of packaged and canned food. You can get bananas, oranges, and apples any time of the year. So one might ask, what's the issue with food security when this is what you see? And what's the problem? So to answer that, I'd say that there is a lot absence. There's a lot of things that are absent from the store, and this picture here does not represent the breadth of ancestral human foods. So go ahead and advance. So past and present, human beings have sourced food from different landscapes through different parts of the world at different points in time. And it's estimated that between 5,000 to 70,000 plant species have fed human beings worldwide. That has changed dramatically within the last 100 years or so. And now, depending on how you count, between 30 to 103 plant species feed humans today. And the juggernauts of this list are the cereal crops, maize, which is also known as corn, wheat, and rice. It's estimated that 1 in 3 plant-derived calories come from these 3 plant species alone. Go in advance. So agrobiodiversity is a term that specifically identifies biodiversity within human food systems. And that includes, but isn't limited to, these somewhat overlapping categories of conventional food crops, livestock, wild gene pools, and first foods. My presentation is going to focus today on conventional food crops. So agrobiodiversity is in trouble today because 90% of heirloom varieties of food crops in the United States, at least, are considered extinct now. So when you look at this pie chart, you see this orange wedge here, and that represents what food crops remain today, and the rest that have been cultivated in time are now either extinct or lost. So, there's varieties of things like cucumbers and apples and broccoli, for example, that don't exist anymore. And so when you go to Safeway, what you're seeing is just a fraction of what's in that orange wedge, and everything else is gone. You're not seeing anything that's in that peach zone when you go to Safeway. So the next, a question someone might ask would be like, well, how did that happen? And then you could advance the slide. We can see that that's, the rise of industrialized agriculture. So in the years following World War II, farming changed a lot. These changes included using synthetic inputs. It included heavy machineries. It also included a practice called monoculturing, in which farmers would plant not a diverse array of crops and plant species, but instead focus on planting one thing alone. And this was a huge departure from how farming had ever been practiced in the past. Since then, government farm policies have been shaped to support industrialized agriculture. Go ahead and advance the slide. So the next question might be, okay, like, why is less agrobiodiversity really bad? Because I can, at the end of the day, I can still go to the store, I can still go to Safeway, I can get, food to feed myself. So I will present the cases of nutrition, food allergies, climate change, and pests to support why agrobiodiversity is important. Go ahead and advance the slide. So first of all, human beings, just like any creature, needs nutrition in order to survive and thrive. And nutrition in the form of micronutrients and macronutrients are sourced primarily from food. So different crop species like apples, raspberries, and potatoes, for example, they all have different nutritional profiles from each other. And what's also important is they also have their varieties of each of these species have their own distinct nutritional profiles too. So it's important to maintain a diverse array of crops, species, and their varieties in order to provide nutrition that supports optimum human health. Go ahead and advance the slide. The next case I'll talk about is food allergies. The rise of food allergies in the last 50 or so years is not well understood, and symptoms of food allergies can range anywhere between just general discomfort to anaphylaxis and death. So because of that, the Food Allergy and Labeling Consumer Protection Act of 2004 identifies 8 major food allergens that need to be bold-faced on ingredient lists on packaged food. So according to this legislation, things like peanuts or ingredients such as peanuts, dairy, eggs, wheat, soy, fish, tree nuts, and shellfish have to be bold-faced. So if you're not practiced at reading food labels, like for a dietary restriction, I encourage you to start doing that to just see how often these things appear in packaged foods. So the consequences of the homogenization of the human diet at large are not known at this point in time, and in reality, it's anomalous when looking at the historic trend of human diets at large. So with that, the impacts of eating a less diverse diet, which is what's happening now in many parts of the world, especially in industrialized countries, that impacts the microbiome, and that might be a contributing factor to food allergies. Go ahead and advance the slide. Another case for agrobiodiversity can be found in climate change. That's because extreme weather events such as storms or heat waves can ruin a harvest. In addition to that, some experts believe that agriculture climate zones are shifting, and that leads to question the viability of farming certain crops in certain places. And so with that, efforts to just, pick up and move crop production to a different locale, like further inland or further away from the equator, isn't as simple as that because soil types vary across the globe. And so although climate zones are changing, soil types are not. So that adds another layer of complexity when trying to cultivate food. So given the circumstances of climate change, maintaining a diverse array of crop species and their varieties is important for food security, since some might fare differently in various climate and or soil regions. Go ahead and advance. The last case I'll talk about today is that of pests, because just like people, plants also get sick from bacterial, fungal infections, and they also get eaten by insects, and all of those things impact harvest for human consumption. So different varieties of crops and different crop species have, they might be more or less resistant to certain kinds of pests, and that will lead us into our case study, which is on the next slide. The Irish potato famine of 1845 to 1849 is the case study we're going to look at. And this famine event was caused by continued failed harvests of potatoes due to a microorganism that made the blighted potatoes inedible. And although many countries were impacted by this pathogen, the Irish food system fared the worst because of their heavy reliance on a singular variety of potato that was the lumper potato. And a consequence of relying on one crop like this made the food system incredibly vulnerable to destabilization. So when that destabilization did come to pass, the result was death, starvation, malnutrition, and ultimately migration. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide, threats to conservation of agrobiodiversity remain. That is continued loss of plant diversity and species. That also includes just the loss of skills and knowledge, things like seed saving, grafting, plant propagation, and so on. And also it includes a practice or a topic called Enclosure, which I'll talk about now. If you go ahead and advance the next slide, that is this is a historic example of enclosure about land in Ireland in the 18th and 19th centuries. So the colonization of Ireland at this point in time by the UK included land being taken out of communal holdings and transferred to the wealthy elite. And this transfer of land had really huge socioeconomic repercussions for the Irish people because this enclosure process entrenched wealth disparities among ethnic and racial lines. And it also facilitated the monoculture practices of the potato, which ultimately led to weakness in the food system and paved the way to famine. On the next slide, we're going to talk about enclosure that's happening today, and that's the enclosure of living organisms. Essentially, what I'm talking about is the domination of agribusiness firms in the food system. So this figure here is another way to represent the loss of agrobiodiversity, but does so in relation to monopolization of seed stock. So as large firms dominate the market, they buy out seed companies, and which leads to the consolidation and privatization of seed stock. That erodes genetic diversity because genetic diversity in the seed market doesn't serve the business models of such firms, like Monsanto, for instance. The enclosure of living organisms in this way is enforced through intellectual property instruments like patents. It's also enforced in license agreements, surveillance, and biotech. This enclosure really threatens food security because, as you can see in this diagram, as the market concentration takes place, there is less genetic diversity, which means there are less genetic resources from which to draw traits that might lend themselves well to drought resistance or pest resistance or nutritional elements. So in order to conserve what agrobiodiversity remains, you have to know where to find it. One place to start is supporting a small farm and like buying a CSA share if that's what they offered, or if that farm offers that. One national CSA locator is Local Harvest. There are others, of course. Gardening is a great way to participate in agrobiodiversity conservation. Also shopping at small retailers like farmers markets, co-ops, food buying clubs. You are not going to find agrobiodiversity at supermarkets or online retailers. You're not going to find it in prepackaged foods, and you're not going to find it at most restaurants. So another way to get involved in this work is to participate with an organization and in political activism. So these are just some organizations in Oregon that I'm aware that I've worked with and familiar with. Growing Gardens, Portland Fruit Tree Project, Real Wild Portland, Grow Portland, Home Orchard Society, Temple Orchard Conservancy, Friends of Family Farmers, Culinary Breeding Network. All of these participate in this work in some way. They all need people to get involved. They all need volunteers and skill sets. They need donations. And also I will emphasize that participating in activism is important, including that with officials, public officials and civil servants who work on farm policy. Things like the USDA Farm Bill and SNAP program, among others, shape how food is produced and also how food is consumed. So engaging on this front is another important piece to this. After all, the situation in which we find ourselves today is due in large part to the enabling factors of government farm policy. So in conclusion, if you find yourself feeling called to act on this issue in some way, and maybe that's buying a CSA share, maybe that's volunteering with an organization, or maybe that's even just trying a new food. So if you find yourself kind of daunted to take that first step, is what I invite you to do is to pause and to ask yourself, what's the risk of trying something new versus taking no action? Because the greatest risk of all is to do nothing. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to open it up to Q&A if there's time for that. I know we're over a little bit.
Yeah, we are actually a little over. I'm sorry about that. So, but if we can have time for questions, maybe we'll have our next speaker get queued up here, and then we can take a couple questions together. How does that sound?
That's great. Thank you for
You're welcome. Okay, so hopefully folks can see my screen and can hear me. Okay, so we have our next speaker, the lovely Jolie Donahue. And if you can tell, we're obviously doing a food theme. This was like, again, the start of the core foundational basic human needs of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so now bringing in this lens of social justice, Jolie Donahue is our Cascade Learning Garden Coordinator at Portland Community College Cascade. Sadly, we aren't even allowed to go in and work on our gardens right now. So that's been quite a shame. So hopefully those gardens are going to be okay. So Jolie, if you can share your screen, I'll stop sharing this one and you can join the party.
Hi everybody, my name is Jolie Donahue. I'm the Cascade Learning Garden Coordinator at Portland Community College, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. So thanks everybody for being here. 100 participants is awesome. I'm really glad to be with you. And I'm going to be presenting today on the Cascade Urban Learning Garden at Portland Community College. I would like to say that I am fortunate to live and garden in Portland, Oregon, on the unceded lands of the Multnomah, Clackamas, Cowlitz Band of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapua, and Malala peoples. With reverence, I acknowledge their culture, their community, their elders both past and present, future generations, and their land that I live on. I acknowledge my living here as a guest is founded upon the exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples, and we must begin the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. So for my presentation today, I would like to walk you through the Cascade Learning Garden. I'd like to talk to you about the goals of the garden. I'd like to talk to you about the history of the garden, our programming, and then the ways that our programming transitioned when we went into the pandemic. So this is a photo here of our beautiful Cascade Learning Garden. There are learning gardens on all 4 of the Portland Community College campuses and also the Newberg Center. Our Cascade Learning Garden is the newest of all of the learning gardens. It was founded, it's actually our 1-year anniversary next week. Earth Week is our 1-year anniversary. So this garden was started by students and by staff that had a very strong commitment to food justice. The primary goal of our garden is to grow and provide healthy year-round food to our students via our Panther Pantry. Some of the other goals in our garden are community-based learning. We are a living laboratory for classes across all disciplines. And because our garden is so centrally located on our urban campus in a very busy, bustling neighborhood, we are a demonstration garden for small space urban gardening practices. As you can see our garden right there, we're in between 2 classroom buildings, and one side of our garden is North Kirby Avenue, which is a public street, and it is also the drop-off and the pickup for the Portland Community College shuttle. So we get a lot of traffic through our garden, not only with the Portland Community College community, but also all of the neighbors. So when we're thinking about gardening for social justice, what does that mean exactly? So our students collaborated to make this garden a reality because they were well aware that 1 in 3 PCC students experience food insecurity. And this is not exclusive to PCC. Unfortunately, homelessness and food insecurity is rampant in college households. And we also know that people of color are disproportionately impacted by diet-related illness. So all the food that we're growing in the garden is packaged up and given to our Panther Pantry. So our Panther Pantries are on every campus, and they are food banks for free for our students and for our staff. There is no financial requirements or screening that happens. People can just come and get food, and this is some lovely packaging that our Panther Pantry manager created for us for the Learning Garden produce. The history of our garden is that for many, many years, our students were dreaming and planning about the Cascade Urban Learning Garden. And so in the spring of 2019, it was established, and how it was built was through funding from an eco-social justice grant. So Portland Community College students voted to put a small tax on their tuition every year, and that money goes into a big pot, and then people can apply for that grant, and then the students decide who gets that grant money. Our garden was designed by a Portland Community College alum. The place that it was created on the campus was this big area of lawn. So the grant did not go to pay a contractor to remove all of that lawn. This was a grassroots effort by the students and the staff volunteering to remove all of the grass out of this area. This took quite a bit of hard work there. It's about halfway done in that photo, and here we are at the end of all of that hard work, and many, many dumpsters later of sod being removed for the garden to be planted. So in the spring of 2019, the garden was planted up with vegetables, herbs, 2 espaliered fruit trees. It was maintained by bi-weekly volunteer work parties. And then in August of 2019, the Learning Garden Coordinator, that's me, was hired, and I came on. So this is what the garden looked like when I came on as the Learning Garden Coordinator. We had 9 raised beds constructed. As you can see, they were overflowing with produce from the summertime. So a lot of crops were grown, and when I came on board, we were trying to get all that food that was grown out to the students that were on campus during the summer, to the staff, to the neighbors, so that none of that food went to waste in the garden. We had tomatoes coming out our ears. We are a no-spray natural garden. So what that means is that we don't even use organic sprays in the garden. No pesticides, no herbicides, no fungicides of any kind. And the compost we use is all natural and organic in addition to compost. So we really dove in earnest in the beginning of the fall term in 2019. You'll see there in that photo that's the center of the garden that's just been removed of the summer crops. There's some espaliered fruit trees right there, and then you can see some of the raised beds. You can also see there's some coiled up drip irrigation. Our garden aims to be as sustainable as possible, so we employ a drip irrigation system on timers. So our students got to work in the fall removing weeds, planting all of these lovely cool season fall crops, which we harvested and gave to the Panther Pantry all the way through the beginning of December. During the fall term, our learning garden was staffed by, in addition to myself, it was staffed by volunteer work parties. So our volunteers were students, staff, faculty, community volunteers. During those work parties, we planted a pollinator garden. We planted an extensive blueberry garden to add to our fruit crops. Our student leaders spread 25 yards of compost in the center area of the garden. So once those crops were harvested there, we spread compost, and then this area was planted with cover crops, which we would have removed in May to plant our summer crops, but they're just going to keep going all summer while the garden is not being tended, and they're helping out the pollinators and boosting nitrogen in the soil and preventing erosion. In the fall, we planted garlic, shallots, and onions, which are overwintering vegetable crops. We planted native camas bulbs in the garden. and we planted these spring blooming ornamental flowers that just started blooming before the campus was closed. We added some red and white currant bushes. There's Briar, our sustainability manager, planting a honeyberry bush. We planted an espaliered fruit tree in the fall. And then this is a technique we did to prepare for next year's native plant garden. So we are a no-till garden. So what these volunteers are doing is utilizing a no-till method called sheet mulching, where they layer cardboard, they put fall leaves, yard debris, compost, and mulch in layers, and that's going to smother and kill weeds and boost the quality of the soil. So as we entered into 2020, we had amazing plans for our garden. We were awarded several more grants for all of these exciting projects that we were going to start in the springtime. This area was slated to have accessible outdoor furniture and home compost. All of that stuff is sitting there waiting at PCC for when the campus reopens, hopefully this summer. This area is slated to be a culinary and medicinal herb garden, is what the students wanted to have here. When winter term began in 2020, we were doing an indoor garden event when the weather was bad. So we were doing learning garden lunch bunch discussion groups. We met every other week, staff, students, faculty, and we tackled a bunch of gardening topics together. These were some of the things that we talked about. It kept community engaged in gardening topics and activities while the garden was still out there, but no one wanted to be there in the cold weather. During the winter, we did community building with a variety of different activities. Like this was a Valentine's Day party we facilitated with the green team, where we did some nature-based Valentine creation, and we also planted up some seeds for pollinator plants. We began our winter term work parties at the beginning of March. We were able to have 2 work parties before the campuses closed. So on March 5th, we got busy. We planted 2 columnar apple trees, a dwarf fig tree, a lot more raspberries and marionberries. This is one of our work study students. The Learning Garden is able to employ students in meaningful work to help support them. And he's working with a student who told us that she had never worked in a garden ever before. So that was a really fun project. This is one of our staff volunteers planting dozens and dozens of strawberries. On March 12th, we planted up our 9 raised beds with over 100 cool season vegetable and herb crops. And a week later, the campus is closed. So we do have all of these crops currently growing in the garden. The garden is on drip irrigation timer. So while I'm not able to be there and care for the garden, it is being monitored by our grounds and facilities staff. So hopefully we'll be able to go back in a couple months and harvest all of those good crops. So as we moved into spring 2020 and we're in a virtual world now, I've tried to get really creative about how we continue to teach about gardening, have community-based learning in the garden, and we engage our community in how they can garden at home. So we definitely are making lemonade out of the lemons the world has given us right now, but I also just want to acknowledge the collective grief and loss and fear and anxiety and uncertainty that we're all experiencing. So not being able to do all these wonderful things in the garden this spring has been very heartbreaking for me personally and our entire student community. So the lemonade that we're making, this is my home garden right here. And what we're doing is we're doing weekly virtual learning garden lunch bunch groups made available for the entire PCC community via Zoom. So what's been awesome about going remote and virtual is that we had about 5 people attend our in-person learning garden groups, and we have had 25 people attend every week our learning garden virtual groups from across the district. I've been able to do demonstration videos from my home garden and take photos and post those on our learning garden Instagram. Our Cascade Green team is still meeting, and we do still have a really awesome virtual Earth Week plan. So big shout out to my PCC sustainability colleagues for putting together this awesome campaign. So here's some of our marketing for our virtual Earth Week events. We do have this great Instagram challenge planned, and with some of the inspiration from Multnomah County employees, our sustainability department put together this great virtual Earth Week bingo game. So I feel like I talked really fast because I had a lot that I wanted you to hear about in my 12 minutes. So I would love to hear what your questions are about the garden, and hopefully when PCC reopens this summer, you can all come and take a look at the garden.
That's wonderful. My goodness, and congratulations for how much you've accomplished. I know that PCC Cascade was the last campus to get a learning garden. We have one in Sylvania, Rock Creek, and Southeast. So you're doing great progress, and I appreciate your leadership. We are on these sessions about 5 minutes over, so we need to move along. These are like TED Talk presentations. They're short, and so we're going to, if we can, we will try to make up some time in our community dialogue section where we can offer some more time for people to all connect together and ask questions. So hopefully that sounds good to you. I'm going to, if you don't mind, so I just do want to really acknowledge, Jolie, that you've done some incredible work. I hope others were impressed by that, and hopefully you'll get a chance to visit. All of these speakers were originally scheduled for our symposium, which was going to be posted at PCC Cascade. So that was, so these are also workshops. These were going to be tours. So thank you for being nimble and trying to translate this into PowerPoint slides and as much as you can into video. So, all right, there are questions that are coming in via the chat page. So if folks want to respond to those, privately, you can write over there. And again, if we have some links, we will be advertising Earth Week. We will be sharing those resources at the end as well via our GPSEN regional hub. So just every question you might have or resources you need, we'll collect those and pull those together for you and send it to all participants. All right, so next up, I'm going to bring Sherry up if we can here. Sherry Vilmark, an amazing activist and leader who has been a friend and partner of GPSEN for years. Goodness, we have worked together and done some community projects and service projects with the Community Energy Project, at least over a decade, perhaps 2 decades. So welcome, Sherry, and you can share your screen and teach us about community solar and equity.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Sherry Vilmark, and I'm a program director at Community Energy Project. And we're tight on time, so I'm just going to launch right in. CEP has actually been around for 40 years, and what we do is we provide a variety of workshops on do-it-yourself weatherization and lead poisoning prevention. We provide services for seniors and people with disabilities, where we do weatherization and make energy efficiency upgrades, as well as safety repairs. We also do energy analysis and consulting with people who want to reduce their energy use but aren't really sure where to start. I'm going to start with something this group is probably super aware of, but just to get out of gardening mode into energy mode, I want to talk a little bit about the consequences of fossil fuels and the benefits of renewable energy. So fossil fuels have a huge amount of consequences. The supply is finite and it's going to run out, so we really need to change how we're doing things anyway. But they're responsible for a lot of air and water pollution, as well as land degradation and hazardous work conditions for the people that are in that industry. And there are these large public health impacts, such as cancer and asthma, that disproportionately hurt vulnerable communities. So what we're looking for is to have more renewable energy, which has a ton of great benefits. One is that it's an inexhaustible supply. Solar panels don't suck energy from the sun, right? It has low carbon emissions. Once those things are in place, they can have multiple uses for the same plot of land. So solar panels can go on top of buildings that already exist. You can have wind turbines that are on, cattle country or grazing lands. And it's much safer work environments for people that are in that industry as well. Oregon's current energy mix has a long way to go. You can see almost half of our energy statewide comes from fossil fuels. And in Portland, it's higher, around 65%. A lot of it is natural gas and coal. And less than 1/2 of 1% of that comes from solar. which is going to be my focus for today. And because of this mix, there was a bill passed in 2016 called the Coal to Clean Bill, was what it was known as colloquially. It says we want 50% of our energy to be renewable by 2040 and be completely off the coal within 10 years. A subsection of that is something called community solar, which was made allowable. And a subsection of that says that 10% of the energy produced must be made available to low-income customers. So this is where we were brought to the table, because CEP has a huge history in working with vulnerable communities. We work with a lot of people who are very low income. More than half of our participants are people of color. I mentioned earlier, we work with people on fixed income, seniors, and people with disabilities. Half of our workshops are translated into multiple languages. We work with immigrant groups. We work with single parents, like you name it. We're working with a lot of frontline communities. And when we were invited to the table around how to design community solar to make that 10% possible, which is twice the percentage of any other state that has attempted to do so and struggled to do so, I came across a lot of surprising misconceptions in the green movement. One of them being, a big one being that equity is a distraction, which I totally understand where that comes from, right? You look around and, you know, you've got ice caps melting, you've got ocean acidification, you've got pollinators disappearing. There is a lot happening, and there's a fear that I heard a lot of, which is people saying, well, you know, we don't want perfection to be the enemy of the good. And if we start to put equity in the middle of it, it's going to slow down environmental action. This was a really common thing that I've heard. Additionally, one of the biggest ones when it comes to including low-income folks and people of color is that you have people that confuse a lack of access for a lack of interest. And those are two extremely different things that I want to touch on. And this idea that oh, this group they're too in crisis to care about the environment. That's why they're not involved in the ways that I acknowledge. They're too in crisis to care. And if I had $1 for every time I had that, I could fund the whole program myself. And I think it's really important that we not take that kind of tone, because the environmental justice movement came from disadvantaged communities, people who are low income, people of color, people who rose above the barriers that have been placed on them systemically to make change in their communities. And so it's really important to acknowledge those groups, and those groups are still very active today. There are very many of them, including here in Portland, but all around the world. And I think it's also important to say, like, what makes an environmentalist? How do we define an environmentalist? And I think a lot of it's like a category on the left. Oh, I drive an electric car, I toss on some spandex and bike commute to work. I buy from ethical companies that do, you know, great things, and my clothing is fair trade and organic, and I have solar panels on my house, et cetera, et cetera. And these are great things. I mean, I fit a lot of these things myself. But low-income folks are also doing a huge number of things that are great for the environment, and taking mass transit or walking if they can't afford mass transit. People are buying secondhand clothes and gears. And you know, when you're living in an apartment complex, you're sharing a footprint with dozens, if not hundreds, of other people. So why is it that the environmental movement isn't acknowledging and praising and including huge numbers of people who are already part of the movement without even any kind of acknowledgement or any kind of, you know, celebration? So I would argue then that equity is not a distraction to the environmental movement. Equity is a missing component. I am an environmentalist, and I have a great deal of eco-anxiety, and a lot of that comes from the fact that I feel like we're failing in a lot of things, right? There's mass extinction. It's happening. All the things we've been talking about today, it's happening. And I think that if we were to think of ourselves on a ship that has a little rudder, and we have to change course. There's a ship that's heading towards something, and we need to change course right now. And there's this little rudder, and it's made up of your classic environmentalists. So you're like, okay, middle and upper class people who are college educated and listen to NPR and have solar panels, and, you know, you're drinking from a mug that's made from a jar. I'm making fun of myself a little bit, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we ask of that tiny little rudder, we're like, oh, and go vegan. Oh, and don't have children. Oh, and go zero waste. And it's not, we're not changing the course of this ship, not in a way that's fast enough that we need to. And strapped to the hull of that ship is a massive rudder of everybody else. And it seems to me that we should be working to cut the ropes that are binding, that are strapped that rudder to that hull, instead of asking more of a tiny little rudder. We need billions of people doing things imperfectly instead of millions of people doing things perfectly. And so when you look at the statistics, when you look at the studies, they say that the people that care the most, the people who don't have to be convinced that climate change is real, the people that want the climate crisis to be the first thing addressed, it is people of color, women, and low-income people. And the fact that we as environmentalists are failing to engage those people is a problem with us. It's not a problem with them being too in crisis to care. So I want to bring up solar as this really great example, right? Rooftop solar is great. I have solar panels, they're great. But there are a lot of huge barriers that make them inaccessible. You have to be a homeowner, you got to own that roof, right? There are these high financial costs that are offset with tax incentives that are made for higher income people. There's ongoing maintenance. The inverter lasts half the life of the panels themselves and have to be replaced. There's ongoing maintenance. The condition of the roof and the condition of the electrical have to be really good. You have to have, your roof has to be facing the right direction, and there's no mobility. And low-income communities are a lot more mobile than middle and upper income communities. So community solar, coming back around to that, was exciting to us because it knocks down so many of those barriers. For the low-income folks, there's no upfront costs or termination fees. There's no maintenance costs. The panels are off-site, so you can take your subscription with you as long as you move around in the same power territory. And you don't have to live in a house. You can live in an apartment or a mobile home or an RV. And it doesn't matter if you rent or own. And so we were really like, ooh, this is a really great opportunity. And so community solar can work like that because it's a huge array, right? Massive array, football field size arrays that have hundreds of different subscribers. That could be a business or a nonprofit and hundreds of other families. And you subscribe to a little section of it, and then you get discounts on your bill every month. It's really similar to if you've had rooftop solar. You pay a subscription fee and then get those discounts, and then your bill would be lowered. And one of the things that came out of the stakeholder process, because the stakeholder process, while all the rules of this community solar program was being designed, invited new people to the table, because you had these really homogenous groups of environmentalists and solar developers and utilities, and none of them had any experience in working with frontline communities. So we, as well as some other great organizations, were like, well, then you should create an expert that's going to deliver on that 10%, the low-income facilitator, who's going to design the program to be something desirable to this new market, to help with recruitment, to help with educating these groups, to help with the intake process of income screening and things like that, and to connect them to the project. And low income hadn't even been defined yet. It's defined now, and that's up on the screen. You can see if you qualify and you're interested. I'll mention at the end how to get involved if you'd like to. And CEP actually ended up being chosen to be that low-income facilitator. We competed against some really great organizations, and we were really honored to be a part of that program design element for the last year. And now we've begun recruiting and educating people about community solar so they can be aware of the program and see if it's something for them. And in that, we created a lot of benefits and specific protections for low-income people, because we're like, these are people being defined literally by their lack of resources. You can't have a system that's made for people with money so other people can make money and then expect people without money to have the same kind of access, right? There's that access interest difference. So one thing that we do is we work with every low-income participant to make sure people are well educated about what they're signing up for, and that they have this really positive, exciting experience as part of their intake, because we're really experienced in asking people sensitive demographic information and such. There's no sign-up fees and no cancellation fees for low-income folks, and there's an automatic minimum 20% discount from versus like the general market. And the big thing is bill credits must exceed subscription fees every month, and that's a complicated way of saying low-income bills cannot go up; they can only come down. And that's something that is guaranteed because we didn't want to see harm coming to people for signing up for the program. So I think when it comes to like call to action, one of the great things that I really learned from this process is how, not only how to be a great ally, but how I was like, wow, I need great allies in this situation where I'm really pushing back and I'm really a minority when it comes to the sorts of things that I'm presenting. And so I liken privilege, and this is something for those of you trying to have privilege conversations with your groups and are maybe struggling with it. I actually most usually dump the word privilege from talking with the regular public because if you have 7 minutes to talk to somebody, I don't want to spend 5 minutes explaining how privilege works. And it makes people feel defensive and weird, so I don't use it. So I kind of liken it to this. Let's say that you have a set of keys that you're born with. Like I would be like, okay, like I'm white, I'm female, I grew up in rural, I grew up in Newport, Oregon. So I got like these keys. And then as I got older, right, there was things like, you know, I had teenage keys, and then later on I had college keys, and I had different keys, trauma keys, moving to a city keys, working in a nonprofit keys. And each of these keys opens a door that gives me access to different kinds of information, community. These are keys. When I open the door, I walk in, I can feel comfortable in these spaces. And some keys you trade in. I've grown up, I've spent most of my life quite low income. That's been slowly starting to change as I've reached middle age. And so it's like, okay, so instead of me taking my keys and being like, look at all these unearned keys, I don't deserve them. Fling them into the sea. That is what white guilt and class guilt does. I think it's a huge waste of time, and that's something I was really glad to learn in sociology. Instead, what's less of a waste of time is say, all right, I have a key to a door that you don't have. How can I get you access? How can I open that door for you? How can I make a copy of my key for you? How can I break the lock? And I think that if we talk about how allyship in a way of utilizing what we have access to and sharing that access with others, that can be huge. And I had a lot of that going through the process of bringing low income to the table with community solar. I had a lot of people who became friendly faces and open doors I had no idea even existed. It was incredible, and it wouldn't have worked without them. I wouldn't have gotten nearly as far. And so if you are interested in the community solar program, I've got a couple of websites. I can drop them in chat as well. On Monday, our website, CEP's website, communityenergyproject.org, goes live, and you can actually sign up for an appointment if you want, and you can learn all about community solar. And then I've got our coordinator's contact info at the bottom. That's it. Okay.
Fabulous, Sherry. That's amazing. You have always been a powerful activist in our world. And I really want to acknowledge that that Community Energy Project has actually won one of our sustainability leadership awards too. You were one of our earliest winners, and you also have helped host our symposium. I mean, our think tank. So thank you for all of those ways in which you help serve. What I'd like to do in our remaining 21 minutes is to invite our executive director. We're going to just move forward here on the slides to have Nirja Havaligi turn on her video, and she's gonna, we recognize we were going to be flexible on time here and also have a chance for folks to be able to ask questions of the speakers or ask questions of each other. But Nirja has a set of questions for us to help us focus on how to take action and how to be resilient.
So want to thank everybody who was here earlier and setting up the stage for this, for the next part. I want to acknowledge the food systems and the energy system, Sherry. I want to take a little pause before we jump into this section. And I want us to think for a moment, all of us who are on this call, think about how the two things we have been hearing, the food systems and the energy systems, how are they connected? Think about the aisles of foods we saw in Nikki's photograph in the presentation. Then we saw the beautiful garden, the permaculture garden, and we saw the solar panels, and we saw public transport. Think about transport, food systems, and try to see the connections. And while we think about that, let's also think about the other things that we utilize through food systems, not just food as in food to eat, but the clothes we wear, the agricultural system and the energy system, how they interact, and what does it mean for climate change? What does it mean to the life we have and the current crisis, how everything is networked through the chains that we have become dependent on. So to get into the, so I just wanted to set that background before we get into the questions. And the question, the task I am scheduled to do is called, the effort is to have a dialogue with all of you, okay? And one of the things that we have done prior is to use the Talanoa concept to have a dialogue with our community, and we did this with our virtual bridge to the Conference of Parties in December. As many of you will know, Conference of Parties is the United Nations Conference of Parties for Climate Change. And we had hosted a bridge, as in we could talk to the folks in COP in Madrid. And a part of the process was at that time to engage our local participants through the Talanoa Dialogue Initiative. So Talanoa basically means, and it is a Fijian and across the Pacific island countries, the word means inclusive. You create a space for inclusive, receptive space for dialoguing. That's one of the way that the Pacific Islanders resolve differences or hardships, or where they have, when we talk about climate change, we don't all agree on certain things. So the UNFCCC said, let's use the Talanoa as a background to talk. So what we're going to do today is we take 3 questions on sustainability. I'm just using the Talanoa concept for sustainability, and all of us will engage in a conversation. How do we do that? Now, many of us are not sharing, the mics, and I'm not able to see faces. So one of the things, as each of our questions go, what we will do is we write our answers in the chat box. And whoever wants to raise their hand to have a voice, like towards the end of the question, we'll allow 1 or 2 speakers to respond to the answer. But I really encourage all of you to please use your chat box for each of those questions and respond, because what we'll be doing is we'll take your responses and we'll stitch up a document basically and say, this is what our community, our participants want. These are their hopes, these are their fears, these are their ideas for sustainability, and we'll publish it and we'll acknowledge all of you. So please take the time to use your chat box and also to raise your hands. Okay, let's move. Before we get in, I just want to acknowledge what today is. April 17th is also International Peasants Day, recognized by the United Nations. We have had a lot of talk about food. I want us to take a moment to acknowledge the farmers who feed us, and 80% or more than 80% of farmers are small farmers, and that's where we get our food from. It's also the year of plant health. So just launching off, and these are our questions. Are you all ready? So I'm going to time us. We are at 2:16. We had originally scheduled this for 20 minutes. Kim, can you tell me how much time we have?
Well, let's try to do this in, 15 minutes max if we can, then we'll do our just final closing slides.
Sounds good. All right, so we have 3 questions, and here are the questions. See, one of the questions we ask is, where are we? As in taking stock of the space we are in. Right now, yes, we are in a pandemic situation. We also have a climate change situation. We also have a situation where our planetary boundaries are stretched for multiple reasons. And when we take stock of those things, the next question we ask is, where do you want to go? Like, as in, yes, I want to go out, I want to speak with my friends, hug my friends, and yeah, that's the other thing. But where do we want to go as a community? Where do we want to take ourselves when we talk about sustainability? What's the vision we have, right? The third question is, how do we get there? Yes, it's fantastic to have a vision. It's fantastic to think about the possibilities, but what are the realistic things we need to get done on the ground so we get there? So we'll start now with the first question. And these are, I have just put out some ideas there. When I ask you the first question, where are we? I'm looking at what your thoughts on what do you think are the main challenges for sustainability, and what are, in your opinion, what are the underlying, the causes for challenges? What kind of sustainable action you want through different sectors, different, at a local level, at a national level, at an international level? Do you have any best practice examples at the current state where we are? I mean, one of the things for me, best practice is, I would say the community gardens to me is best practice. Growing a food garden is best practice. Shifting to solar is best practice, right? And anything else that you can think of which works as best practice at this time, best practice, right? And what kind of technologies do we have? So this is our first question, and let's take 3 minutes, and I'm going to watch the chat box to see your responses coming in. Let's go. Think through and share away your answers. Yeah. Where are we now? And let's just get our baseline. Where are we now?
And this is a question for the greater Portland region, but it also can be beyond.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. I can see some answers coming in. So just know that when I'm writing up all your, putting together your answers, I'll make sure I acknowledge all of you. So please share your thoughts. It's important that we hear your voice. Yes, I see what you mean, all of you. Thank you for sharing, for those of you who are getting in your messages. So let's move to the second question. And what I'm going to do is, even though I move to the second question, those of you who want to respond to the Q1, just write Q1 against your question, and keep typing away if you want to be still contributing the question 1. Okay. So I just want to say, yeah. I appreciate all of your answers that are coming through. People are talking about the challenges, lack of motivation. We don't have an economic incentive for sustainability. I'm just quickly glancing through some of the feedback. We don't have a tax system, or we do not have a system like a policy system that supports sustainability. There's a lack of best models also, and of course there is the corporate world with infinite profit orientation, lack of endowments, etc. So I will make sure I compile all of your voices, and I want to say thank you for being so generous and sharing this. Let's move to the second question. And the second question is, where do we go from here? Like, where do you envision? It's calling for your vision, like your call of action. What do you want to be? Where do you want to be? Like, think about 2030, think about 2050, okay? What is your short-term and long-term vision? I mean, yes, being placed in pandemic, I can only think of 1 week, maybe that's fine too. We can only think of 1 month. I mean, right now we are in a very challenging situation. So be generous and to yourself when you're responding to this. You don't have to think very long term, but what is your vision, right, for sustainability? And where do you think we should focus? What kind of sectors? Should it be energy? Do we see the connection between energy? Agriculture is the largest user of energy. So there is a deep systemic connection between the two of them. So what would be the change? What would be the course of change? In which sector do you want to emphasize more? And what, in your opinion, are fundamental barriers? Some of you already mentioned, but if this is another time where you can start talking, right? Yeah, let's go to question 2 and let's see what we get here, okay?
I'm loving seeing all of the great answers in here. Nirja, thank you for asking such good questions. So everybody, if you are not already, if you don't have your chat page open, just go to the bottom of your screen and click on chat, and then you can see what other people are saying and you can type in your answers.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Yeah, we are getting some really good answers. Yeah, what would be your vision? Where do you want us to be together? Do you see a specific sector that has the largest impact? For example, the consumption system. Think about the consumption system. Yes, we are all consumers. Where do you think we can make the largest impact as consumers? And when we think about consuming, we should also think about equity, equitable consumption. How is it possible? And what are the things we should do to enable that process, right? Yeah,
somebody asked when it was around the agro biodiversity question about what about all of the cool companies like Imperfect Fruits and these different ones that are actually bringing products to our homes that are outside the traditional distribution system. I thought that was a really interesting question. So I'm not sure if Nikki would want to respond to that, or Nirja, if you have a thought. Like, how can we connect with the farmers who can go outside the Amazon delivery system?
Right now, as in context of the pandemic, is it, Kim? Are you talking as in current situation?
I was just trying to respond. I was trying to give voice to the person who asked the question earlier around what other models exist that might help us to engage with the economy in alternative ways to support local economies.
Yeah, I think our speakers have actually given us a load of ideas, starting with even starting a window garden, starting with very basic things, as if, let's say I'm in an apartment, I have one balcony and I can put 3 pots. That's a good start. I am in a balcony, I have enough sunlight. Is it possible for me to get a solar system installed to offset some of my carbon emissions? Maybe. And all the things that Sherry mentioned about thrift store and the other things, yes. And what Nikki mentioned, can we connect? Which way can we connect to local farmers, local CSAs? Especially here in Portland, we have a rich, diverse CSA network, and I can provide the resources, and I'm sure Nikki has too, you know, how we can engage with community gardens, community markets, farmers markets in context of food. And as a consumer, yes, where would my footprint be? Yes, I have to think about, before I shop anything on Amazon, I have to think twice. Do I really need to get this on Amazon, or can I support a small business?
Yeah, so we have a couple minutes left. Can we move on to, I'm loving all of this, but let's move on to
yeah, I'm going to the next question, and the next question is, how do we get there? Okay, and when we say how do we get there, we have to think, let's reflect about what are the fundamental changes that we need in business as usual. Right now, business as usual is, if we didn't have this COVID-19, and if we weren't all sitting and reflecting back on the unemployment rate, the challenges to food each of us have, and we start reading about the food banks that are stretched to their limits, that they don't have enough food to give away. And we start understanding the complex world we live in, and how intricately we are related to each other, and how one virus can disrupt everything. So knowing that, what do we say, what are the fundamental changes that we need to do to get to the vision we talked about, right? Whether we have COVID, or we have climate change, or we have both. In this case, we have both, and we have much more problems. So, and the planet is asking us to reflect on ourselves. At least that's how I see it. So, you know, legally, what can we do? Are there policies that are fiscal frameworks that we can change? What kind of advancements do we need? Do we need technological advancements, or do we need to go back and look to ancestral deep knowledge and connect with that? Where does the indigenous knowledge take us if we are able to listen to it and to acknowledge it in the first place, right? And what kind of roles do financial sectors have? And what are your expectations from leaders at local level? And what do you see for yourself as a leadership? You know, within you, what is your call to get there where you want to get there? So we are at 2:31, and let's take 2 minutes, and I'll wait for your answers for how do we get there, and then I'll wrap up my session.
These are such profound conversations. And I know this is just, for everyone listening, this is just the start of a movement, right? Like the GPSEN Sustainability Symposium series, we're going to take pieces of these. We have other incredible speakers who wanted to contribute. We'll do shorter sessions over the next couple of months. We also will be providing resource lists and connections for folks to the speakers. So let's just say this is a flowing energy towards social change.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for, you know, I can see capitalistic economies and diverging from sustainability. Yes, we are in a golden opportunity. How do we take this opportunity to the next level? How do we use education as a channel to wrap this all up and say, what are the ways that we can educate ourselves? And yeah, when I talk about education, I can connect it to what Rachel is saying, asking for what we exactly want from people, businesses, and governments, which means, again, businesses, governments, and people have to have the basic education to understand how everything is holistically connected, which I think Serena mentioned right in the start, that there is a lack of holistic connection between the dots, right? And that itself is a fundamental starting point. So in my view, and I believe many of you who are here, you know, education is a very fundamental way of connecting, right from when you're born and as you grow upwards to any age. We are constantly educating ourselves, in the sense we are constantly learning. And every one of us, irrespective of what jobs we are or where we are, if we are not cognizant of this really intricate braided, like Kim mentioned, like a braid, you know, we are braided, whether we acknowledge it or not. I think all of us right now, we acknowledge that we are very, very braided. And yeah, I want to, yes, there is basic research, best practices, encourage everyone to think about local food. And when we do think about local food, I quickly want us to think about how much we are dependent on outsourced food, beyond Oregon or beyond wherever you are participating from, Boston, Massachusetts, wherever you are, right? How much of our food comes from somewhere else? What does it mean to those economies that rely on us as consumers? How can we be better consumers, being cognizant of these connections and the relationships that we all are part of and we contribute to it, whether we know it or not. Okay, so with that, I want to, you can continue to use the chat box to, continue to give your feedback, and please look out for our, the blog that's going to come out, the summary, a report will come out of all your feedback. And I want to go to the next space where I know this is the, just want to remember this as we take stock of today. Today is the International Peasants Day, and acknowledge all the hands that feed us. And let's not be silent, let's be active, let's continue to do what we are called to do at an individual level or at a bigger level than that. With that, I want to close my presentation. And those of you who have the time, you can look up at a United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Peasants that was in the Book of Illustrations. It's up on the website, and I can send you the source. So thank you all very, very much for participating. This is excellent. And Kim, the floor is yours.
Oh my goodness, Nirja, how inspiring. So many of you. We are going to continue to collect as you guys are sharing your examples. That's a wonderful way to, at least within writing, create a document from our time together. We are going to move through, I have to get my own, I have all of my own chat page open. I keep reading everybody's, it's so good. So we're going to move just to the end. So here's our closing. We want to just connect in and say, what's up? What's next? And so if you've not gone to our GPSEN Regional Hub, that's our GPSEN website, you can share events, job opportunities, grants, resources, curriculum, publications. Be sure to do that. But we wanted to let you know that we have, as I'm doing this, you can still be adding to the chat page. Our session is going to run a little long, but we're going to, when we get through this, we'll be sure to have saved the recording, and then this will still be available for all of the viewers. Okay, so what's up next? Of course, it's Earth Week. Yay! Starting today, we're kicking off Earth Week, and I really want to recognize all of the people around our region, around the world, who are celebrating our 50th birthday. It's happy birthday, Earth Day. April 22nd. So please do know, as we convert to our remote efforts, that all of these things are still happening. So Nirja, I think that your voice, hopefully you can still speak. You've got a couple other things that you wanted to announce too that are coming up, some events that people can enjoy in the future.
Yeah, so we have a Bridging for Sustainability event. That's our think tanks event, which Kim and Sherry, we used to host at Sherry's office space, and now it's going to be online. And this one, this event is going to be April 30th, and we're going to connect on 2 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goal 14 and 15, which is life on land and life on water. We're going to have Friends of Columbia Gorge with us, Portland Harbor, and also PSU folks joining. So please join us for this talk is going to connect policy, science, and practice. So you're going to get 3 different windows. And again, this is going to be people-led, so you have plenty of opportunities to ask questions and take away a lot of lessons. And Kim, can you go to the next one?
I will. I just wanted to acknowledge how many people are having to convert to online. So thanks for everybody's patience and trying to learn. So yes, next.
Yes, so the next one is, I want to acknowledge Frank and Annette here. You met them at in the beginning video. That is Frank Granshaw, our senior advisor at GPSEN. And Frank and I will be presenting at a Clean Network teleconference. And the Clean Network basically is the climate literacy and energy awareness network. And what we'll be talking about is taking the conference of parties, the virtual bridge for conference of parties. So we are going to talk about broadening the engagement for climate change. All the details will be also on GPSEN calendar. The invitation will be there. So make sure those of you who are interested to understand how we can sit here in our rooms and still contribute to climate change. That's a great way all of us can do something, and each of our fingerprint is important. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. And so next week, just do check out the GPSEN Regional Hub. We do our best and depend upon you to add in events and opportunities for the community. There was a large demand when GPSEN first applied to the UN to become a regional center to have a shared calendar. So this is where it is. And if you want to come through the business lens, the B Lab, B Corps are hosting a lunch about the SDGs and their new SDG Action Manager. This is a tracking tool for businesses to be able to see the differences they're making on a local level. So that's April 23rd. The virtual bridge, Neeraj already mentioned that. We're gonna keep you posted. They did have to cancel it, the actual meeting, but we will be offering some kind of a virtual bridge to talk about climate change on a global level. Given everybody here, who I know if some folks are checking out and understanding timelines here, I just wanted you to know that this series of speakers, everybody, we had over 40 people who were going to present during our traditional symposium at PCC Cascade. So we're going to tap into, and they've all expressed interest, can we do something online for all of you? So today we focus on permaculture, energy, and social justice, food security. So all of our speakers, thank you for your great work. Coming up, we're going to be inviting folks who are working in the arts world, arts and activism, a very important area that we need to honor and support. We will be bringing in our business leaders, and Jamie Honning is the board member and head of the Corporate Sustainability Collaborative. So let's talk more about what can happen in the private sector. And since there's been interest and we wanted to dig in more into the questions of climate change and clean energy. So those are also part of our keynote speakers. These are folks that, in fact, Sherry was one of our plenary speakers, so I'm so glad she could speak today. So that's keep an eye out for the calendars. If you're not already on GPSEN's listserv, be sure to sign up, go to our website. We want to thank everyone who's helped make our Sustainability Symposium possible. My goodness, we just couldn't do it alone. So understand that the Sustainability Symposium is our annual event. It's the one fundraiser we have each year. This was free. It was free online. If you do feel called, if any of this has inspired you, I do ask, I mean, humbly, I'm a friend raiser, not a fundraiser, but I would like to say, if you feel called to donate to support our programs, please go to GPSEN.org and there's a donate button there. And if you are feeling called to be a leader, our GPSEN board member applications are opening soon. We'd love to have some people across the 4-county region, to all demographic stripes, everyone who would like to contribute and bring your skills to helping advance the Sustainability Education Network. We'd love for you to join us. So we will be sending out that invitation soon. And finally, thank you for joining us. You're here. We love that you're here. We will send out an evaluation form to get your feedback. Your voice matters. And for further questions, if we can, we will invite you to go to our website. We do have different contact links there and more details that are, of course, are shared. Remember, we're all in this together. This logo, this slogan, PCC has been using that for years, and now we hear it everywhere. Here we are, we exist together. Blessings to all of you. I hope that you're well and that this was a meaningful time for you to be a part of this whole event. So this is the end. I'm just trying to send you to a few other places where you can get involved. I know there are lots of chats. We will be collecting your ideas, recording them, and sharing them after the session, okay? Bye. Thanks for those who are waving. I really am grateful for all your work. Shaka, full on Hawaii shakas. We're gonna be okay. Mwah, mwah, mwah. All right, I'm gonna end the session. Love you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.